broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
So the Western Australian state election is on this Saturday, the 8th of March. Now, my guest is a law academic at Curtin University, Dr Rocco Loiacono. He is the author of Deconstructing ScoMo. So that's how I had him as a guest on my show a number of years ago with Augusto Zimmerman, who I've had on the show many times as well. And he's also a Sky News contributor. And he is also a Spectator contributor as well. Rocco, welcome back to WilmsFront.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the latest poll that we've got from the Western Australian state election is a news poll which has two-party preferred Labor government 56% to the Liberals 44%. Primary vote it's 42 for the Labor government, 32 for the Liberals, and 3% for the Nationals. So a lot of the commentary that has been beamed over to us on the East Coast from the West is that it's going to be a comfortable re-election for the Cook Labor government, though you're on the ground there. So it's obviously there's all the local media covering it, but you're seeing all the call flutes and the candidates everywhere. What's the feeling on the ground?
Look, talking to candidates and talking to people, there definitely is an appetite for change. The question is whether the Liberals and the Nationals have done enough to convince voters to make that change. The economy is going well at the surface. If we didn't have the resources sector, I think we'd be in a bit of trouble. And for all the flows of money that are going into government coffers, government debt is forecast to increase from $33 billion, which, by the way, was the level it was in 2017 when the ALP came into office, to $39 billion over the forward estimates, so to 28-29. And hospital ramping is 5 to 6 times worse than it was when the ALP came to office. Police are resigning in record numbers. There are cost of living pressures. Taxes and charges are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. So there are a lot of reasons to be upset, but whether it's enough for the Liberals and Nationals to convince the voters that it's time for a change, I think people are yet to be. At the moment, what I'm seeing, there'll be a swing back. They're coming off such a low base. There will be a swing back, but given that they're going to have to climb the proverbial mountain, a change of government at this stage is hard to see.
They are coming off such a low base. Well, the Liberal Party in Western Australia. So the McGowan slide, obviously during the peak of COVID, it was quite extraordinary that the Liberal Party in the lower house was reduced to a rump of 2, 7 in the lower house, and in fact the Nationals were made the official opposition. And so David Honey was the Liberal leader, and then there was the spill of 2 MPs, and Libby Metham became the leader, and then there's been a change in the Nationals leadership. Mia Davies is going to contest the new seat of Bullwinkle at the federal election, and Shane Love is the new Western Australian Nationals leader. And then, of course, the biggest change, Mark McGowan retiring because he was tired and passing over.
He's now got 5 jobs. He's so tired.
Exactly. Handing over to, well, it was a stitch-up. A factional stitch up to Roger Cook. Now, the impression that I get of Roger Cook is that he hasn't got the charisma that Mark McGowan did, but he's, as I've said, just mentioned in the polls, he's still holding a comfortable lead for the government.
Yeah. Look, the thing with McGowan wasn't well liked by his colleagues either. I mean, back before after the 2013 election, in fact, they actually tried to replace him with Stephen Smith. But it just so happened that they couldn't get themselves organised, and they stuck with McGowan. In the end, the Barnett government proved so unpopular that McGowan surfed in, and as they say, the rest is history. But look, the thing with Roger Cook is that he was health minister. I mean, leaving aside all the COVID nonsense, and he was health minister over that, but he was the health minister who's presided over the record hours of ambulance ramping, right? And he was deputy premier, and he was the health minister who presided over what the WA Auditor General called for want of, I think she said it was the most lack of regard for spending of public money, with total absence of preparation over the handing out of rat tests. They were budgeted at $3 million, ended up costing $500 million, all these rat tests, which ended up having to be thrown away. So the question is, why isn't the government on the nose? It should be on the nose. But see, the thing is, over this time, the Liberals, and we go back to 2021 when they tried to outflank the Labor Party on the left with green policy by saying, "Oh, look, we'll shut down coal-fired power stations quicker than the Labor Party."
Yeah, is that Kirkup?
Yeah, and look, the energy policy is better, but it's still trying to walk both sides of the street. And the Liberals are still, I mean, they've come down hard on some good issues, or have got some decent policies on several issues, such as no men and women's sports and things like that.
Yes, that's
but on things like,
she's taken a stand.
Yeah, but on things like The Voice, I mean, Libby Medham was for The Voice, and then she changed her mind when the polls were going the other way. And the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, which the Liberal National Parties actually voted for, it wasn't until that they saw that it was just going to be the debacle that it was, and the unprecedented attack on private property rights it was, that they started changing their minds. Now, people don't forget that. The flip-flopping around, as I say, people don't forget that. So as bad, I mean, you would know, being in Victoria, as bad as a government is, people will re-elect a bad government unless they're giving a convincing case for change. And yes, they've made some strides on some policy issues, but whether it's enough, as I say, it's whether these flip-flop issues or flip-flopping on these issues might remain in people's minds. And think, well, you know, you've got to come down on things like that from the start on principle. And I think we saw that in the Voice referendum when Peter Dutton came down pretty much on the get-go on principle, and he was rewarded for it. And sometimes I think those lessons haven't been learned.
Yeah, that's an important context that you raise, because obviously it's been well received in the East that Libby Medham has said we're going to reverse self-ID in WA. We're going to ban puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for under 16. And it's been to us here in the East, and it's like, wow, that's refreshing. Wish Peter Dutton was like that. But the history is that the WA Liberals haven't been haven't stood up in the culture wars until right about recently.
That's right, and people, as I say, people don't forget that. And what did John Howard once say? You can't fatten a pig on market day. Similar kind of scenario here. You've got to come down on principle on these cultural issues from the start, rather than play catch up.
And obviously, Libby Medham, she's also dealing with what I term a shadow opposition leader in the Mayor of Perth and Liberal candidate for Churchlands, Basil Zempalis, who we all know here in the East from, well, us Victorians know from his Channel 7 AFL commentary, and he was also commentator on the Olympics. He's been a
and the
public
tennis.
figure. Yeah, tennis,
And
tennis as well. He's been a media figure in Perth for over 20 years. And obviously he's very, being a media personality himself, he's a very polished media performer. And he also, when he was a mayor of Perth, he took on, wanted to be sort of the maverick mayor, and took on the Albanese government over its flip-flopping of Australia Day, saying, oh, we have no plans to change Australia Day, but we're going to let local councils decide to cancel it.
Yeah.
So he's definitely made a name for himself on political principle as well. But what's your view on him? Is there what is the Basil political philosophy, do you think?
Look, I don't. I've only met Basil Zemplis a couple of times personally, so I don't know him all that well. Like I've met him a couple of times, so personally, I don't know them all that well. So what I will say is both of them are prepared to sit down and listen to you when you put a point to them. The thing about Basil is, because of his profile, he's instantly recognisable, and he has obviously that polished way, as you were saying, of speaking and of getting a message across. And I've heard the man talk publicly several occasions, and when he's speaking, the room is listening. And he was also on radio. He was also a breakfast radio host as well, in addition to his TV commitments. So he's very well known, and the Labor Party, in fact, were, and still are, still scared of him, because they've got him alongside Libby Medham on their attack ads. And they've been attacking him left, right, and centre. But as with a lot of mudslinging, it really hasn't worked, because there was an exit poll that came out in the West Australian, I think a week or two ago, that had him at, and look, it's off a small sample, so as with all these things, you should take them carefully, but that had him at 70% of first preference votes. So I don't think there was ever any issue of him holding his seat. Look, we will never know. We will never know if the Liberals had changed and done a Campbell-Newman type thing that they did in Queensland in 2012, and made him the de facto leader from the outside and presumptive premier if the Liberals were to win the election. We'll never know that. But look, the fact that it took to the debate for Libby Medham to really start getting a message across and to get down and dirty, as they say. It's all about the recognisability and the perception, isn't it, a lot of the time? And you play that off against Zemplis, and he obviously would have had a lot more presence and a lot more recognition. And the fact that the Labor Party directed a lot of his attack ads at him, I think, shows just how worried they were about him, and the fact that the Liberals might have made him presumptive leader should they win. So what is it? 2 days out from an election, it's hard to know now what the result would have been, but it's fair to say that they might have had a better chance of winning more seats, but we don't know.
I've heard Libby Medham speak, and she's not the best speaker, but when the talent pool is a rump, you've got to take what's there. Although, of course, Anastasia Palaszczuk, when she was opposition leader, wasn't the best speaker, but he took the party from a van full of MPs into government. But the polls aren't suggesting that for Saturday. But talking about the mud that the Labor dirt machine is flinging at Basil. They tried really early on, where there was that hot mic at a press conference where they tried to make it seem that he was calling the Australian Open women's single tennis final the reserves match.
Yeah, and it turns out it was directing a comment at a journalist from another network, Michael Genovese, who was actually put on. Who wasn't actually covering the tennis. So he was, what Basil was saying was, well, you're on the reserves rather than actually covering the main event. And these kind of things, people have seen through that. As I say, it hasn't stuck. And people here are concerned about a lot of things. They're not worried about this nonsense and this mudslinging. They're concerned about power prices. They're concerned about cost of living, we've also, in the area not far from where I live, basically the local issues are the ones that are gaining the traction, rather than this kind of parallel universe that some of the politicians live in. It's the local issues that matter at the end of the day, and the candidates that I've been speaking to have been just focusing on those local issues. For example, not far from where near I live is the Burswood Crown Casino, and Roger Cook, at a time when hospitals are struggling and there's record ambulance ramping and service deliveries at the worst time that we can recall in modern history. He wants to put a racetrack there, and so it just shows that they're out of touch, and that those kind of issues are the ones that the candidates are focusing on and gauging traction, as trying to put the government as out of touch on the bread and butter issues.
I remember during the COVID era, because there was there was some argument that the reason that Mark McGowan wanted to keep COVID zero in Western Australia for as long as possible is because the health system already couldn't cope. I think there was this horrendous case of a little girl dying because they didn't detect properly a emergency department.
Yeah. And I'll just stop you there, because if you don't mind, because Roger Cook. Unfortunately, a similar kind of scenario happened under the previous coalition government, and Roger Cook was health spokesman at the time, and as well as saying that 1,000 ambulance ramping hours was a crisis, he said that no child would die under his watch in a hospital waiting area, and he was the health minister when that actually happened. Right now, a person with even a half decent person would have resigned after that. So. The fact that and to get back to your point about COVID zero, there's no way the hospitals were struggling with a flu outbreak, with the 2018 flu outbreak, which I think was one of the worst on record. Let alone, there's just no way they would have coped with anything resembling anything greater than that, which is of course why Mark McGowan took the COVID zero route. And was rewarded for it.
And I remember there was a hospital roof that actually collapsed, and it was sort of a metaphor for what was happening to the West Australian health system at the time.
Hospital roof collapsed. New software I think there was software to record patients' data. It was crashed. It was just been an absolute schmozzle. Everywhere you can look, on every measure. This Labor government is starting to resemble Victoria's Labor government.
Yeah, it does. And what's their excuse? Because they're not broke like our government.
No, not at all. I mean, look, they wanted to close. They wanted to take away some level crossings, which is fine. I got no issue with that. But to do that, they've built this bridge, and they wanted to extend the railway network, which is fine. But it's $12 billion over budget and 3 years behind schedule.
Yeah, it's like the worse than our metro tunnel.
A bottomless pit of money. And the thing that the Liberals, I don't think, have managed to capitalise on is the white-hot anger that was present during the time of those cultural heritage laws. A poll came out in the West Australian after, I think it was September of 23.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the Liberals were if had an election been held that weekend, Labor was gone. And they just haven't managed to capitalise on that.
Well, Roger Cook did basically, well, it's called doing a Peter Beattie, saying we got this wrong. I apologise for all of the anxiety that it caused, and it seemed to, well, it didn't save the voice referendum, but it certainly saved him in the polls. Now, the West Australian Liberal Party not only has a celebrity candidate, but also a celebrity state president in Caroline de Russo. I mean, she's been prominent on Sky News Australia for many years, where you're a online contributor, and obviously she's very into the culture wars as well, very combative. We've obviously had a sort of celebrity, a Liberal president here for many years in Michael Kroger, though he hasn't been since 2018. What's the sort of, is she prominent in the campaign?
Well, I don't think. Look, I mean, I don't think she's definitely the campaign director. That's Sam Morgan. Look, and look, she's involved in the campaign, no doubt about it. And I'm sure she does a lot of the strategy.
She does the job for nothing.
Yeah, and look, and whether this campaign will be a success can only be judged on the amount of seats that will be won. So once we know on Saturday night what the result is, depending on how many seats they won, we'll know whether this campaign has been successful. I think that's the only measure you can take on whether this is a good or a bad thing. Look, there definitely needed to be a clean out. There definitely needed to be a clean out of some of the, and there still needs to be. There are some people in there who I just don't understand why they're in the Liberal Party, other than time-serving, personal aggrandisement, that kind of thing.
Well, we've got plenty of dead wood in our Liberal Party here.
Yeah, and a lot of them in the upper house. I mean, we had Peter Collier, who's actually standing down at this election, when there was talk of maybe Basil Zemplis being the presumptive leader. The Liberal candidate, given there are so many of them, I think there are only 10 people in the parliament, for the Liberal Party. So you've got 50 or so candidates and 10 people in the parliament. And Peter Collier, the candidate, said, well, look, in these extraordinary circumstances, shouldn't we have a say as to who the leader should be taking us to the election? And Peter Collier, who, as I say, is standing down at the election and has absolutely no interest in this, said, oh, no, get stuffed. It's the people in the parliament that make the decision. Now, Peter Collier, as an education minister, I don't think, he's one of these parliamentarians that you can't really chalk up a huge achievement to his name. I mean, I'm sure you can name some in Victoria. Yeah, as I say, time servers, and very comfortable, just not trying to do too much, not trying to rock the boat kind of thing.
Just want the title,
Yeah.
Now, Roger Cook has been in Anthony Albanese's ear clearly in the lead up to the election. Look, don't ditch this Federal Environmental Protection Authority. Roger Cook is well, Albanese also wants to retain all the seats in Western Australia to offset the losses that are probably going to come here in Victoria and New South Wales. Although there's been obviously a Trump threatening tariffs on Australia that is bound to affect Western Australia's economy into the future. And Roger Cook decided to put his foot in that by calling JD Vance a knob, though sort of said, yeah, or he immediately said, I'm allowed one unprofessional moment. But there could be trouble ahead for the mining industry.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the Labor Party is no friend of the mining industry, despite Mark McGowan being cosy with some key mining figures. But the mining industry came out against thanks to Gina Reinhardt, the cultural heritage laws and the voice eventually. Thanks to Gina Reinhardt, the mining industry realised some
Peter
of them
Garrett
didn't.
hasn't helped Labor this week.
That's right.
Slagging off Gina Reinhardt.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's the way they operate, because it's the old look over there, straw man type thing. Look, a government seeking a third term should stand on its record, right? Now, this government has no real record to speak of if you actually look at what it's supposed to do. And I've enumerated, hospitals, law and order, you name it, cultural heritage. I mean, and we talk about Cook being in Albanese's ear over environmental laws. I mean, he didn't stand up to Albanese when they decided they wanted to get rid of the live sheep trade, and there are signs all over here about that too. There are lots of reasons not to vote for the ALP, which is why it resorts to this kind of infantile strategy of insulting people.
And they've had a go, the Labor Dirt Unit, at a couple of the Labor the Liberal candidates for some colourful comments that they've said on social media, such as the Kimberley Liberal candidate Darren Spackman, and also there's the Albany Liberal candidate Thomas Bruff. So I guess they're trying to feed into, look, the Liberals are not ready, they're still a rabble.
Yeah,
that's their strategy.
Yeah, and it's all about experience. I mean, all the campaign ads about the experience of the Cook government, and the Liberals had never been in government, never held a ministry. But as Paul Murray, the former editor of the West Australian, pointed out, well, Roger Cook was actually parachuted into the parliament, straight into a shadow cabinet role, without ever being in the parliament, without ever holding a cabinet position back in 2013. And of course, as you said earlier, it was a union stitch up to make him premier. So, these kind of attacks often fall flat when you actually look at the people who are making them, and they're hypocritical at the end of the day.
I think WA election night, it could deviate from the script, which I think that you've alluded to. Thank you so much for providing us with your local expertise before the big election day, and we shall see if Albanese, well, he probably wanted to call the election on the Sunday, though of course we've got the cyclone up north, which we're hoping that everyone up there stays safe. But Anthony Albanese, he wanted to be up on stage with Roger Cook, but that's obviously not going to happen now. No,
and I'm not sure whether the state would want the feds here anyway, considering the Albanese government here. There's as I say, because of the banning of the live sheep trade and other things, whether the Roger Cook would actually want anything to do with Albanese. I think he'd want to keep him away.
Although I'm talking about at the Victory Party.
Pardon?
I was talking about at the Victory Party, what they hope is the Victory Party.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the only reason Albanese want to attend a party here is if he could get some reflective glow, that's for sure.
Oh, thank you again, Rocco, I know that you're very busy, and so thank you for your time. And of course, your columns, they're free to view on skynews.com.au. Though over at the Spectator, you need to have a subscription to it, but of course, they're just as great.
Thanks very much, Tim. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And let's see what tomorrow brings. As I say, the polls are pointing to a landslide, but there, as I say, there are a lot of local issues that are at play, and we'll see whether they're enough to swing the pendulum.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.